Well, hey folks, it's your old pal, King Krampus. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of my thoughts on what to do with Werewolf the Apocalypse. And, well, I guess we're getting close to towards the end of the year 2021. I mean, hence the fact that I whipped out the Santa coat. So, I guess some notes on how to run Werewolf the post-apocalypse in the year 2022. In a previous video, I kind of brought some of this up, and I kind of just want to focus in on my specific ideas of what to do with a werewolf campaign. The basic gist is there's a lot of things about the 20th anniversary edition of the book that I like in terms of some of the ideas. Like especially I like the continuing to play with the Phoenix and the Phoenix prophecy, but as is the case with a lot of their 20th anniversary products, there's a lot of effort to kind of try to reset things back to the status quo as it was. And I feel really, it has more fidelity to me as someone who played a lot of the World of Darkness games back in the 90s to actually, acknowledge and incorporate the fact that the apocalypse and Gehenna and all these other, world-ending events supposedly happened. So with Werewolf, there's going to be some conceits I'm going to build into what I'm talking about here, and I don't know if I'm ever going to run any of this. I do like spinning campaign ideas off the top of my head, and who knows, maybe you out there might hear some of this and might tickle something in your brain, or you might want to adapt something I'm talking about. But the thing is by acknowledging that there was an apocalypse just after the turn of the millennium for the supernatural world, it allows you to strip a lot of the excess baggage out of the setting. To me, I think the real thing that really started to cause the World of Darkness to go off the rails is just there's too much stuff going on in it where, it was no longer, out of the city of, like 10 million people, there's like maybe a dozen vampires. Now it's out of a city of 10 million people, there's like a couple of hundred mixture of all these different kinds of supernatural beings all competing and warring with each other and doing weird shit. And on top of the fact that also there's ghosts everywhere, and it's a bit too much. It's overload. It makes each individual supernatural being in that setting not as special because there's so many options. So for my purposes, we're gonna say that the apocalypse did happen, which is kind of an odd thing if you're gonna focus this particular video around Werewolf. I'm also gonna say that Cain came back. So the vampires that are, descended from Cain, which is the, the Western European ones from the classic, vampire line and Dark Ages, and, maybe the vampires of the Ebony Kingdom, I've never actually had a copy of that, so I'm not exactly sure what the legendary is on whether or not they're truly attached to Cain. But if they are, I guess that means they're also off the board. But you would still have the Eastern Kindred. And for the werewolves, they all went to go, whatever it was, fight the worm at the Red Star and all that, and then they didn't come back. Thing is unless all the kinfolk are killed off, then the werewolves aren't extinct. So it's literally been enough time since those events that kinfolk who had children that would then, carry the, lycanthropy gene and actually become guru, are now reaching an age within that setting that, they're at the cusp of or have already gone through their first change. But if a setting where you've removed all the obvious werewolves, and so, instead of a campaign focused on, fighting Pentex and the Worm and doing the Captain Planet thing again, I would set it up that the werewolves are kind of more cut off from being able to step sideways into the spirit world. And they're having to, rely on their kinfolk networks to try to find someone who can tell them something about what the hell they are and all this stuff. They're not going to start off with any gifts. They're going to have to, go through a lot just to even learn that they can go into the spirit world and meet spirits and learn gifts. That should be a big, momentous occasion, when they finally do that. But I would have them go through a few steps. For one thing, I don't feel like the kinfolk hold quite the same amount of interbreed grudges as the actual changing breeds and werewolves did. So I feel part of the gimmick is to have your character or your little collection of characters that the kinfolk have brought together, because it's like, oh my god, new werewolves, the prophecy, yada yada yada. Since there's no known adult werewolves left, who, you know, are carrying on through the traditions and knowledge of the tribes and stuff, they'll, you know, hook up with the kinfolk of other changing breeds, and then you can have like a series of adventures where the characters are having to seek out, you know, an actual member of one of the other types of shapeshifters and like do their little, you know, Luke Skywalker at the temple learning how to do the thing kind of sequence for each of them, until you get to, you know, being taught to go into the spirit world, get their gifts, and then, you know, like learning what the actual real landscape of things is. And my idea is that in this continuity that I'm kind of trying to set up here, is that the worm and the wild are kind of pushed into the background, and it's the weaver that is now the dominant power. And going also on the assumption that the mages are gone because of Ascension, and that there's no more traditions and no more technocracy active, you know, within this realm. If, you know, if you're able to get far out to the far horizon and all that kind of stuff, you might still be able to find those kinds of people. But nothing for player characters anymore. You know, replace them with sorcerers. Without a technocracy, Pentex has actually kind of filled that void, and Pentex in the 21st century is now a servant of the Weaver and its machinations, more so than it used to be a servant of the Worm. This is a Pentex that bills itself as a green energy type of Pentex with biodegradable materials and organic foods and vegan diets and paleo accurate meat cubicles and soylent whatever. Yeah, that's what Pentex has become. Maybe a little bit kind of on the face, a bit harder to fight directly, and not necessarily what the characters are trying to build. You know, this is after the apocalypse. This is the rebirth. This is the Phoenix thing. Like, they're freshly risen from the ashes. You don't immediately turn and strike at the thing that just killed you. They got to rebuild everything. So that's really what these characters are doing. They're the first of a new pack. They got to find more of their kind. They got to, you know, like reignite a sept somewhere, actually have an active cairn again. And maybe through the journey of having to get in touch with all these other changing breeds, maybe be able to, you know, create something new and better in their new form. Because, like, maybe all that old bitterness, you know, from the war, you know, in the past, where the werewolves betrayed all the other shapeshifters and tried to wipe them all out. I want to say that was the War of Rage. You know, like, that's kind of, you know, the characters have a chance to make up for that. And now you have a new generation of werewolves that, you know, have had to, like, learn about themselves through other sources. And, you know, okay, so also, once you get to the point where, you know, they get to the spirit world and they're able to get gifts, this is also when you're able to kind of expand the map out some more. And when they're able to finally actually find a few others, like, rare, exotic werewolves that are still off in the world, they're just not in the North Americas or Western Europe. I would say that definitely there should be some stargazers, maybe not that many of them, but there should still be some stargazers found in the East. And arguably some silent striders, because otherwise in the setting I also want to include Mummy and the greater kind of arc of the old World of Darkness games I'm going to include in this. I'm going to do some more videos on the other segments, and kind of how I feel like you should structure that. But, you know, so you might have some silent striders out there for them to meet if they can get to Africa. You might have some stargazers, you know, for Central Asia, Tibet, India, Kazakhstan, that kind of stuff. And the real secret is to learn that the werewolf tribes of Japan are still around. They weren't there at the Red Star for the battle against the worm. You know, one of the big questions that I myself like kind of still pondering and haven't really come up with a definitive opinion one way or the other on this is whether or not that the Black Spiral Dancers would still be around, or did they also get all wiped out? And so does that mean that there's a chance for the White Howlers to return if a Black Spiral Dancer kinfolk has a werewolf kid and there's no adult, you know, culture of Black Spiral Dancers to warp that newly foundling White Howler into becoming a Black Spiral Dancer? Plus, also with the worm kind of pushed back to the background, and Pentex being, you know, more now the enemy for kind of what's replacing the mages in terms of the various smaller, you know, sorcerer societies of hedge wizards kind of being brought together by the mummies to deal with all that kind of shit. Werewolves are basically just, yeah, trying to like just, you know, rebuild a new global werewolf culture and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like there should be some stuff in there that you can use. Tell me in the comments what's good or what's bad, and stay waspinated.